Hello, this is my video submission for the article analysis to the university as a multinational. So what is the major overriding issue is that with the rise of globalization, traditional service sectors like the higher education market are feeling the pressure to globalize the operation or fear becoming obsolete and ancient in this new world. The world demand for higher education is tripling, which has seen a massive increase in the money being spent on higher education. Many of these universities and entrepreneurs alike are scrambling to get a piece of this pie. Universities are responding to these pressures by creating startup-like versions of their home university or home campuses in foreign countries. Who are the stakeholders? The universities attempting to expand, the students on the receiving end of these expansions, and of course the country that they're expanding to. The universities like Harvard, for example, would have their name and their reputation to go off of on has strengths. Obviously, if Harvard were to expand to a foreign country, students will want to attend that because it is Harvard University. They have their name, their reputation, and their longevity backing them up. Weaknesses might arise from the cultural differences that come from how Harvard would operate their universities versus how a local university within these countries would operate. And a threat, obviously, is the fact that a lot of people are waking up to the business-minded approach and process that these universities are using to handle these expansions. A lot of people are recognizing it for the profit grab that it is, rather than trying to bring education to these foreign nations and make it accessible to students. As for the students involved, there are some pros and cons. There are some strengths, opportunities, and threats. Obviously, the pros being the fact that higher education is becoming accessible in developing countries. It will probably be a lot more affordable for them to take classes within their country than to travel abroad as an international student, because being an international student is so expensive. But the cons do slowly start to present themselves. The fact that the quality of education, the experience that they would have attending classes in their home country would not be the same that they would have attending it in the country of the university's origin. A business class taken in India provided by Harvard may not exactly have the same experience and quality to it as it would have if it was taken at the Harvard University's home campus in Massachusetts. So there's that, and also depending on whether or not these universities are still charging these students international rates while taking classes in their home countries, also factors into the price debate as well. So what are the issues? The fact that universities are expanding to international markets is very surprising, because I guess it makes sense, because a lot of people within the domestic market, especially in the United States, are not viewing higher education and colleges in a favorable light anymore. The conversation around higher education and colleges are very much negative in nature, whereas the conversation is about how the fact that entry-level positions in America now require bachelor's degrees and they're paying minimum wage. So these degrees are losing their value over time. For a degree to mean anything and take you anywhere, you will have to have a higher level of degrees than you would need before. One would just need a bachelor's degree to get a good paying job, but now a master's degree might not even cut it anymore. So, and a lot of these colleges are doing these expansion for profit, as was stated earlier. So they might be trying to cut costs where they can. It will be a lot harder for these universities to expand their STEM education programs to other countries, because of the cost of trying to buy more equipment that will come with these classes, pay the professors that would need to teach these classes, then maybe say trying to take a liberal arts degree or a business administration degree across nations, because those are easier to teach and can be essentially taught anywhere. So I think the issue that I addressed mainly was the fact that the changing conversations and tones towards higher education in colleges within domestic markets like the United States versus where it is internationally. Obviously, there is a demand for international education. That's why these universities are expanding overseas. But within their home countries, especially in the United States, which is the biggest source, which is the biggest originator and source of these expansions, the conversation is a very different one over here. So what was my reaction and perspective? The concept being presented here is not very new to me. I graduated from a community college that had several campuses spread out over Maryland. Obviously, it's not the same as a university expanding overseas, but the idea still remains true. Market has been in favor of students trying to reach as many students across the Maryland area as possible, trying to make it easier for them to get their education so they don't have to travel further to reach a campus. But what it ends up being is not quite what it's advertised as. The quality, like I said, the quality of experience ends up shrinking the further out you go from like the main campus. The resources provided ends up shrinking the further out you go from the main campus, because it's expensive to run multiple campuses and costs have to be cut somewhere, and most of the time it's at the expense of the quality of the education that these students at these other universities are receiving. So that was my experience. I attended the main campus of my college, of my community college, so my experience going there was much different than someone who, say, attended the campus that was in Silver Spring or Rockville, which was not the main campus. So yeah, it just cannot be replicated. The same type of education cannot be replicated across the state, much less across international borders. So these students are getting the short end of the stick. My recommendation, as always, is if an entity is going to exist in a foreign country, it has to adapt to the culture and the environment. I think it's great that Harvard would want to have a campus in India, for example, but it has to exist within the context of the culture of India. You can still provide the education, the concepts, the knowledge, but it has to be respectful of the culture and the country is existing in. It can't just be profit-minded, and that's what you see most of the time when something like this happens. And it ends up, as much as the money is made, it ends up still being expensive. So there are ways that these universities are going to try to find to cut down on their costs, and most of the time is going to end up negatively affecting the students, the receivers of these services. So